Hello, everyone. Welcome to TNT Live. This is a bit of an impromptu episode that we didn't really plan on doing until today. And honestly, I didn't even realize that this would be an episode topic about a week ago. But we are joined, me and Daniel Bordman are joined with Anthony Zambito, former PPC candidate for Dufferin-Caledon, and who is also a former PPC member as of just a few days ago because I guess for some reason publishing articles that are slightly critical of the PPC at the National Telegraph is forbidden, and Anthony has been thrown out of the kingdom of Maxime Bernier, and we are bringing him on today to be able to talk about the controversy and what happened, why it happened, and kind of sort of the nitty gritty details about why the PPC as a party hasn't really taken off since 2019's first election, and then after 2021, why it's kind of been faltering.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just throw it to Anthony here, but Anthony, you were the first person ever exiled from the PPC, which we find to be a very, very interesting story. So it was likely in response to the article you wrote and published at the National Telegraph. So take us through your journey and what it's been like for you since this has gone out.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you both of you, Wyatt and Daniel, for having me on. For those who don't know, on Sunday night, I published an opinion piece through the National Telegraph.
Which is in the comments section right now if you're looking for it. So.
Yeah, feel free to take a look at it. Just kind of an honest opinion, a critique of, what's been happening within the PPC, what PPC headquarters has been doing to kind of, stifle the grassroots movement, and also a critique of Maxime Bernier. It was more of an honest opinion. Like, I didn't expect it to be so antagonistic, and I didn't expect such a strong response afterwards, but it must have struck a chord at PPC HQ. It must have struck a chord with Maxime Bernier, because we published that on Sunday night, and Monday night I was effectively kicked out of the party at every level. I was no longer, I was the candidate in 2021. They told me that's never going to happen again. They kicked me off, they kicked me out from being the CEO of my local EDA, and they kicked me out entirely for being a member with no hearing, nothing, just basically in response to the article. They said that the article that I wrote, it was a clear violation of the party pledge that I had signed, but that is not true. And that is what the PPC is telling right now. That's what they're saying publicly.
Well, and the funny thing, too, is that they're acting as if the article was, unprecedented. There was nothing within the party that would suggest that anyone had this opinion. And it was just an out-of-the-nowhere attack, when I think you've told, at least me in the past, that no, you had actually been telling people inside the party that certain things need to be dealt with. The grassroots have to stop being stifled so they can actually do their own work. For quite a while, and after they wouldn't listen, then you published the article, and then they basically accused you of ambushing them with your opinion, as if a libertarian-esque party shouldn't be able to survive someone's own free speech being directed at them in a critical manner.
Yeah, that was really weird to me too. The word on Twitter, people are trying to write me off as if I'm some sort of CPC shill. I've never worked for the CPC. I've never been a member of the CPC. I've only been a member of the People's Party of Canada at the federal level. They essentially had an opportunity to listen to an actual PPC member who's trying to get their voice out there, and the PPC decided to ignore it. And yeah, like you said, this isn't unprecedented. This happens all the time in Canadian politics. Conservative members will write about the CPC. This happens in American politics. Nobody's more critical of the Republican Party than other Republicans, and the same thing with Democrats.
It's literally healthy for a party. I feel like the moments when the Conservative Party has faltered the most and become the least popular was the moments when they started trying to kick people out for having mild opinions. Like Aaron O'Toole kicking out Denise Batters is what effectively started his sort of fall from grace, which was finished off by his weak response during the Freedom Convoy. But it all started when he actually started trying to huck people out of the party for, just speaking their minds about how he ran the election. And you effectively did the same thing. And Maxime Bernier tried to Aaron O'Toole you out of the party, or I guess he did Aaron O'Toole you out of the party, which in my mind, the funniest thing is that everything that the party has done to you, everyone in HQ calling you up and saying that you're out and trying to unilaterally unperson you in the PPC, that would make them in agreement with O'Toole doing that to Denise Batters, because they're going on about, well, Anthony broke the pledge, he broke the party pledge, and you showed it to me, and I want to see if I can go find a photo of it. It's literally just two "I'm not a robot" style checkboxes. One of it says I support the majority of the PPC's platform, and the second one says I've not done anything in my past that would embarrass the party, which is a little bit silly if you're trying to be the party for everyone and like you're against cancel culture, that you're like, but be perfect when you show up.
So
but also, it's like it's past events. There's nothing in the pledge that says that you can't be critical about the PPC's a way of operating in the future.
Yeah, just let's contextualize, and Anthony, you can add more context if you feel I've mischaracterized your article in any way. But the article you wrote isn't like a 17-page thesis statement that reveals the inner working deep state, naming names behind the scene of just how dysfunctional and malevolent this all is. It's not that. It's a pretty standard political criticism from someone who's inside the PPC, and you're essentially saying that, hey, I think it's too much focused on rallies and not enough focused on EDAs. Like, this is the same criticism I had of the PPC. And you point out two instances of EDAs getting nuked by headquarters. One, the Hastings, Lennox, Addington, whatever riding, which was dissolved because it tried to write a national constitution, right? The PPC promised a constitution. When we interviewed Maxime Bernier, he said, oh, one's coming. And then our EDA riding tried to write one, and they got dissolved. And the other riding in a different region that was dissolved because it didn't want to join a conglomerated didn't want to be conglomerated to this big EDA that covered many different ridings for a lot of reasons. You can't win like that. That's a bit of inside politics of, small EDAs with big EDAs. Like, the point of the EDA is to be small, to focus on the community. And there's some pushback, but they were dissolved. And this is some very standard, I'm in politics, I ran for this thing. This is a political criticism of the party. It is not like Maxime Bernier is a fraud and really owned by Klaus Schwab, and like is really this and this, and they're fake this and fake that. It's like, no, I have some concerns about the structure of this, and it doesn't lean heavily. It doesn't. What I've said, it's like it basically doesn't utilize grassroots politics nearly as effectively as it should if it wants to win. With some examples.
Daniel, you were right on the ball. Like, essentially that. Like, I am just an average person. I work a 9-to-5 job, and I first got involved with the PPC when I heard that the Dufferin-Caledon EDA was getting started. Just your average citizens, like it was one father of three who started it up with somebody else who was a university student. Like, just your average people started it up, and I kind of got involved with this camp. And I've seen what's happened with this camp and the battles they've had with the PPC headquarters, creating the EDA and then having it expand to become a regional EDA, only for that to get dissolved. And then me having to recreate the EDA that we had already created. Like, from my perspective, I've already seen it. You brought up in another part of the country, that's in Kelowna Lakes country. So out there in British Columbia, same thing, a run-of-the-mills guy who was running the EDA out there. PPC HQ was putting pressure on the Kelowna Lakes Country EDA to regionalize, to, basically amalgamate with their neighboring EDAs. Well, if you know anything about the geography of Kelowna and that part of British Columbia, it's very rural. And right away, the Kelowna Lakes Country people were like, not hesitant, but they just basically wanted to get input from their members before adopting this amalgamation. That wasn't enough for the PPC. They decided to proceed and dissolve their EDA, basically denying their members the opportunity to vote on regionalization. And in Hastings, Lennox, Addington, they are still advocating that they were drafting a constitution, and they're basically still pleading with the party, saying that this is unjust, that Maxime Bernier is making these decisions, basically calling into question the fact that Maxime Bernier is the sole governing authority of the party. EDAs like in HLA and in Kelowna Lakes country, basically they weren't willing to jump the second PPC HQ told them to, and as a result, they got deregistered.
Well, the funny thing about HLA too is that they were making a constitution for the party. They were literally doing just free work for the PPC, saying, hey guys, maybe you're super busy. We're going to put together a constitution that gives the memberships that people buy to the PPC more than just a tax receipt that they get to use at the end of the year. That you actually get voting rights. We'll have a convention and we'll vote on policy. And the thing is, those things are so important, because when you actually show up to the conventions and you're voting and you're meeting other members, you're building the party culture, you're building the structure, you're giving people abilities to have an investment in the party. Whereas if you just have a membership that gets you nothing, well, and other than you get to vote in leadership reviews that Maxime schedules himself, that who cares? And even then, even if Maxime lost that leadership review, there's literally no democratic function to say that he has to step down. It would just say, well, I guess I didn't do too well in that one, and then he could just keep leading the party. It's silly, but HLA doing the free work for the PPC to start a constitution literally got shut down. That's how absurd it is. The thing, if you would, the Conservative Party, I would never say there wasn't corruption in the Conservative Party, but they're never that overt to kick you out for doing something like, oh, I'm going to put forward a constitutional amendment. You're allowed to do that in the Conservative Party. There's a lot of things you can't do, but you can at least do something, not just sort of sit around and wait for Maxime Bernier to tell you what to think.
Yeah, and I can understand like if PPCHQ was insulted by the article that I wrote, but like to throw me out without a hearing, that is the biggest thing, you know, to throw me out without an opportunity to appeal, without an opportunity to explain myself. That is the thing that, you know, kind of surprises me the most, especially because the PPC brands himself as being the party of free speech. Like
there's a greater irony to all of this. It's like the inception of the PPC was Maxime Bernier, and I think you even wrote this in an article. You gave him his due. Maxime Bernier getting screwed over, and like watching that, and like what was going on in Quebec, and the buying of the votes, and the dairy cartels, and like the narrow margin share won by in the highly suspect election. And PPC was essentially founded on the principle of like, this is not how Canadian politics should work. We're making a party for the people, and at no point has there ever been any say that the people have had in the People's Party of Canada. And listen, I get why some people like the PPC right now. You're anti-lockdown. You know, the government's crazy. You've been forced into your house for 2 years. And Maxime Bernier went around the country saying, you know, enough is enough for the last year or so. And to his credit, you know, enough is enough. He's right about most things lockdown. But the very fact that, again, you look at the pattern of behavior here, which is they claim they want a constitution, and then they don't, and then they spend years and they don't write one. Someone tries to do the work for them. So it's like not just that they're super lazy. If Maxime was just very, very lazy and was just smoking weed and going to rallies and like, oh, I didn't have time to write a constitution, you'd be like, great, someone's doing my homework for me, right? You're the lazy kid in class, and the smart kid's like, can I just do your homework? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Then you say, no, I'm not going to do my homework. I don't want anyone else to do my homework. I'm not going to copy off you in the test. We're just not going to have it done. It means that the PPC headquarters doesn't want a constitution. Right.
And the thing is that too, is that when we actually had Frank Vaughan on like a year and a half ago or so, he even brought this up, and I've seen the post. I think it's still up if you really go back into Maxime Bernier's Twitter, right after the first election in 2019 that they went through. And it's like, fair enough, they didn't have a constitution up till 2019. They're just getting their sea legs. They're running up to they know an election's coming, so they're trying to move quickly. Fair enough. And then afterwards, Maxime Bernier kind of goes on like vacation. And then when people are like, hey, why did you just go on vacation right after the election and just kind of dumped everything off? He posted a photo of all these like constitution type books with him while he was at the lake or something, like all these sort of conservative philosophy books, as if he was writing anything, like when it was like Constitution on its way or something stupid. And it's like, it's 3 years later now and we still don't have anything. At some point someone needs to call you out.
Now is Wyatt, so I'm going to cut you off here and say the question is, I think we've seen proof that he doesn't want a constitution. The question is, why doesn't he want a constitution? And this is my Occam's razor thing. The simplest answer is often the base, because a constitution could be used to remove him from leadership. It means someone else could take over the PPC. And this is what it said, is the PPC is not a political party anymore. It's the Maxime Bernier show. And I think there's enough evidence coming towards that, where they're not doing the things they need to win elections, not expanding grassroots and the ground game and all this. These just going around on Twitter and going around the country saying like very sort of, I say it both literally and figuratively, the fringe things, right? We the fringe, I get it. Like, but he's kind of taking positions that are just like really, you know, for like a hardcore base that to just like draw in financial support that he's never going to win with. Like, I don't know why Maxime Bernier was foreign policy advisor under Stephen Harper, and Maxime Bernier knows that he shouldn't be taking his current position on Russia. Like, he should know geopolitics better to know that, you know, the criticism of the Ukrainian stuff isn't actually as valid. It's more complicated than that. Like, yes, there's some money laundering in Ukraine. But like, to pretend that Ukraine's the most corrupt country in the world, like, no. Like, when we gave Afghanistan money, the president like just like ran away with it, and like it's just like it's not the same thing. Like, he knew as foreign policy secretary that like appeasement of dictators doesn't work, and now he's kind of tweeting. Now he's kind of, because the reason you would go and like back and push some like, you know, quasi pro-Russian stuff is because you want the people who are like so down the rabbit hole who think of you as the savior, and he's sort of building a cult of personality. And in my estimation, the reasoning here is follows: he doesn't want a constitution, so he can't be removed, and then he wants to build up a hardcore base of followers, the most hardcore and loyal, that will always accept him because he's always telling them they want to hear, so he can continue to siphon money off of them indefinitely. That's my opinion of what the PPC looks like from the last 4 years of its behavior.
That is essentially it. You nail on the head again. You know, the PPC, like the people who joined the PPC in 2018 when it first started, those are not the people that like most of those people aren't around anymore. They've left the party. In addition to that too, like
Maxime, I love this comment.
What did he say? Sounds
BL sounds like PPC is becoming an in real life version of one of those political Twitch streamers. Like,
pretty much, yeah. I mean, like, no, actually, here, let me say this. Like, there are a lot of PPC members that I have respect for. There's a lot of
I talk to PPC candidates all the time, and I love them. They're like great citizens who just like took up the call and wanted to get involved. But like, my problem is they're getting no support from HQ. Like, they're fighting a war, and the general's MIA.
And this is another thing too. Like, you know, I wrote my article. The thing that the PPC headquarters doesn't know is that I keep in touch with more PPC members on the daily than they do. I'm in touch with, like, you know, candidates, volunteers, and a lot of them are split on their thoughts on my article. Half of them some of them have outspokenly said that they support what I've written. For instance, the team at HLA, Maggie Sagunis, who represented Cambridge, she came out and supported me. Some people basically came out and, you know, gave their thoughts on my article, what they thought of it. And some people have even taken to lying about me. But there's an underclass of people within the PPC that agree with what I say, that want the principles of my article to get escalated and to get exemplified. Now they're scared, though, that if they go against what the PPC says, they're going to get kicked out. It's almost like they tried to make an example of me, that if you go against what Maxime Bernier wants, what the PPC wants, you're going to get up expelled, like that ill and unprofessional party pledge violating guy in Dufferin-Caledon.
Yeah, that's why I don't like this. Like, I hated Aaron O'Toole. Like, I didn't vote.
We were literally the first publication out there that was like explicitly anti-Aaron O'Toole. For any of those like flat out mouth breathers out there who are like, you guys are just CPC shills if you don't like Maxime Bernier. Yeah,
I see someone in the comments is asking for the article. The article is in the comments if you're looking for it. I put it in there. If you can scroll up. This is one of the, like, this is the major flaw of the O'Toole era, which was just like the excommunications, this thirst for power from Aaron O'Toole that we saw, where he wasn't willing to engage with the grassroots. He wasn't willing to listen. He had his GTA Toronto advisors, and they were like, I talked to conservative, like same like you. I would talk to people out in BC, like conservative activists in BC who were running EDAs, and the people who would run, they would fly people in from Ontario to tell them what to do. And they'd be like, no, I know my neighborhood better than you do. And they'd be like, you're out. And like, what? No, you're out. And like Ontario people just kick him out. Like, because like Aaron O'Toole knew best. Aaron O'Toole would know how to win the GTA, and the whole country is the GTA. And it's like, no, it's not. Right. And this sort of excommunicating anyone who would like who was just different than him. Right. Polyev was more popular, so he demoted him. Denise Bathers said some conservative things. She was kicked out. You know, the whole Bill C4 debacle, which he just rammed that whole thing through. And that was essentially what, you know, and all this did come back to bite Aaron O'Toole in the ass, but that's because he didn't found the CPC. Like, the CPC had a constitution. It was a party. You know, it predated him. There were mechanisms to remove him that he pissed off enough people, and they implemented, and they pulled the levers. This seems to be a story, though, of the PPC making sure that none of these mechanisms ever get built. And it will ultimately destroy their party, I think, because their founding principle was power to the people, and this would be the people's party, and the people could remove it anytime they want, and that just seems to not be true. This seems to be the Maxime Bernier show.
And to go to into the whole Maxime Bernier show thing, I don't feel like people. I think the PPC HQ does this where they say, well, all of our reports are online, we're transparent, and it's like, sort of. You can put stuff online on your website, but it's not advertised information. The thing is that people don't really seem to know that Maxime Bernier is not just doing this for charity. He literally gets paid. I'll bring it up on screen right now, or not this one. Oh, I had to go find it. I literally have it on screen on another page. But Maxime Bernier gets paid $104,000 a year for everything he does. For every year to just run the PPC, whether it's an on-year or off-year election, whether he ran that year, he didn't. He gets $104,000. Then all of his travel expenses are also paid for. Lots of other stuff are paid for. I've seen him. He gets a lot of food comped for him everywhere he goes. It's not like he's roughing it for the people and trying to make sure that he makes the party like operate as best as it can. Like the party doesn't bring in that much money every year. Yet on off-year elections, like when there's no election that year, they're spending like nearly $400,000 on staffing expenses every year and $550,000 when there is an election. It's actually a massive amount of money going to people who are probably getting paid full-time salaries to do probably what you consider not exactly full-time work when you see how little is actually accomplished most of the time outside of sort of media hype, which it's not even really their doing. It's more so they're activists who aren't paid who are the people who are gaining them support. But yeah, like remember that Maxime Bernier gets a six-figure salary, and I believe he's also collecting his pension every month from being in office. It's ridiculous. But another thing I want to do, like to highlight, is that I actually think, and just personally, this is my own theory, that he's getting way more money than anyone actually thinks. It's not just the $104,000 salary, because does everyone remember the Toronto Centre and York Centre by-elections from 2020?
Every day, everyone knows everything about them, Wyatt.
But Maxime Bernier ran in York Centre in 2020, and this guy named Bajid Bawa ran for the PPC in Toronto Centre. And together, both of them got, like combined, both of them got less than 1,000 votes. And this is elections where the winners were like getting like 23,000 votes or something like that, or like maybe it's like 17,000, but they're getting like over 10,000 votes for the winner. And these two together didn't even get 10,000 in their two ridings. They spent, and here's the thing at the bottom, you can see this party transferred and spent $42,280 to the candidates in those by-elections, i.e. Maxime Bernier and Bajid Bawa. Where did you see that money in those two elections? Where did you see that money getting people out to the doors? You know what I mean? Like you think it was to the point, I think I calculated back in the day, it was like $23 every single vote they got. And they didn't exactly make a big impact. I understand it's a long shot. They're not going to win that riding, but it didn't even, like, I would have used that money so much better. And that's the problem in HQ, is that there isn't any standards on how they spend.
Yeah, like, and it's, like, listen, I think the leader of the PPC should be drawing salary from the PPC. Like, I'm not expecting anyone to work for nothing, and that is like a job, and you can do it. But if part of your criticism of the establishment is, oh, all these greedy politicians, I'm different, well, you're not acting in a way that's any different, really. Like, you're also drawing a pension from your previous time, and like, where are we seeing this investment? Like, are we really seeing this investment pay off in any type of ground game? Like Maxime Bernier, he goes to rallies and he speaks, and we see him on Twitter making tweets. Like, I have a Twitter account. It doesn't cost $100,000 for me to tweet daily.
And I just want to clarify, I'm also not against the party leader making money. It's more so, do I see that $104,000 on the field when he's out there? Like the problem with rallies too, and I think we would all agree, the problem with rallies is that the mom who shops at Safeway and buys her coffee at Starbucks, who's not super political, is not going to different parties' rallies to figure out who she's going to vote for. She's just going to sit at home. If someone knocks on her door, she'll talk to them, and then maybe she likes a couple things they said. She gets a couple emails from some people. She got a couple mailers she looked at, but it's mostly people vote based on who talked to them. They're not going to PPC rallies. The people who go to PPC rallies support the PPC, just as people who go and see Jagmeet Singh at NDP rallies are NDPers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Maxime Bernier showing up to these rallies, like I can understand at the height of COVID, when you had 20,000, 30,000 people, at Queen's Park. I attended a lot of those rallies too, right? And they're important in the sense that they're good for networking, they're good for making contacts. A lot of volunteers for the PPC, made their way to the PPC from these rallies. I'm like, the thing is though, you can't just keep doing that for 3 years and expect a different result. Yeah, like you said, why? He's spending $42,000 in a Toronto by-election. How come I'm able to get 4 times the votes with a quarter of the money? Okay, mind you, it was a general election. I was fortunate enough to get 4,300.
Yeah, there was a bit of a wave happening at
Yeah.
that point against COVID. Fair
Yeah.
enough. But the thing is that I feel like the leader in York Centre, which is a conservative riding, I think they actually prevented the Conservatives from winning it back. I don't really care. I don't really like the argument that the PPC caused the Conservatives to lose. If you're not voting for the
But I think
Conservatives, you're not voting.
York Centre was Liberal. It was Michael Levitt who held it, and then went to Yarrow Sachs.
I think it was like a riding that the Conservatives could have technically won. The
Conservatives could have won that one. It was also like, it
was a more conservative. I'm thinking relative to Toronto Centre. Like, they technically could have won it. I don't buy the nonsense that the PPC prevented the Conservatives from winning the riding. No one it's not your vote if you didn't win the vote. At the same time, It never felt like Maxime Bernier's kind of name recognition was actually rubbing off in that riding. And a riding that his name recognition would rub off on, and I keep getting flack for bringing this up, is in Beauce. And in 2019, when he had the better chance, and in 2021, he was nowhere to be seen. And I understand that, I want to rally support all around the country. But let's make sure that we can prove that the formula of the party works in one riding first. Elizabeth May, when she was trying to get herself elected, I think she first got elected in like 2006 or 2004. When she first got elected, it wasn't because she was touring the country and people out in Nanaimo or whatever small town is in her Vancouver Island kind of little area. They didn't vote for her just because they happened to like her. It's because she organized all the Green Party's resources in that area and make sure that they could prove that the Green Party could win a seat. The problem is in 2019, he actually wasn't even that far away from winning. I think he was like 9 points down, which is not much considering the fact that he didn't put that much effort into the area. If he stuck around and just pooled the PPC resources and said, hey guys, just letting you know, I don't think it should be surprising. No one else is going to win. This is our first election. Most parties don't even survive their first election. But if I can get reelected, we're going to explode, and we can probably even coax some CPC people who are dissatisfied with Scheer and O'Toole over to our side. But that didn't happen. It was like it's frustrating when I see someone almost acting in such a way to ensure that they don't actually have to do work in Parliament, because he's still being paid a parliamentary salary effectively.
Yeah, he is. I'm not going back to what Daniel was saying before too. I'm not against the fact that he's like earning a salary. I think it's modest, but it's just he's not even using it for his town in Beauce. Like, how much time does he even spend in Beauce? He actually lost votes between the 2019 election and the 2021 election in Beauce. What does that make me think? That makes you think that he doesn't connect with his own riding. Number one. Number two, I think it would be worth his time to show people how to campaign in their ridings, rather than like last election. The campaign strategy for Maxime Bernier, at least from my perspective in my Ontario riding, was, hey, Maxime Bernier is going to be attending a rally in location X. Bring all your supporters to location X. And, I did that one day. I ended up losing almost an entire day of campaigning. I asked myself, if Maxime Bernier was to stay in Beauce and just like do a good job there, I wonder if that would be more impactful across the country. But obviously PPC does HQ wouldn't want to hear an opinion like that.
And even then, you're actually right. When you tell someone to like a candidates to say, send all your supporters and volunteers to like sort of geographical location X because we're having a rally, you're to a certain extent wasting their time. Rallies are great almost between elections. Like big parties do them for photo ops every once in a while, but these massive parties like the Conservatives, Liberals have enough people where they can kind of throw some of their members over to that rally to sort of give them a backdrop to take photos with. But when you're a small party, all those people could be door knocking, all those people could be doing phone calling, all those people could be in their areas. When you're a small grassroots party, you have to just double down on the fact that you're a grassroots party and invest in the volunteers. Don't invest in the tour, because the tour can happen afterwards. That's where you drum up support when an election's not on, where you don't need to be in specific areas. And again, like, I don't think that he even won any more votes by touring. I think he ended up just creating more social media hype. Maybe he got a little bit out of it, but again, he would have done so much better if he's in Beauce. And again, I'm not just reserving this and like sort of having this double standard where I don't care if the Conservatives aren't making the same mistakes. Pierre Poilievre just made the same mistakes in Mississauga Lakeshore. He did not go to the riding, and he lost it. Ron Chahizer or whatever, I forget I can't pronounce his name. What?
Chinzer, is it?
Chinzer, there you go. I heard it today on Andrew Lawton's show, which is a great show. But watch this one before you go and watch whatever Andrew Lawton just did. But like Pierre Poilievre is known for his viral videos and rallying support. Like, he won the Conservative leadership race with like record-breaking numbers, basically, and he didn't try and help out a Mississauga candidate who had a realistic chance of winning. By-elections have very poor turnout, and if Pierre Poilievre brought some of sort of like the magic to that riding, did some viral videos in Mississauga Lakeshore, showed how Pierre Poilievre's Justin Trudeau's running the economy in that area, I think he could have rallied out a few thousand more voters and actually like given the Liberal a run for their money. Even if they didn't win, they could say, hey, we brought the margin down to just 1% when it used to be like 5%. That would have been a great thing to do anyways. But it's like he was too scared that he'd lose. And I think in the same sense, Maxime Bernier was almost scared that if he tried in Beauce, he would lose and he would look worse.
That's a good point. I think that he needs to step it up. And this is another question too. He needs to step it up in Beauce. And also, this is like a real criticism here. You got to ask yourself, if Maxime Bernier was lucky enough to form government, would he make a good prime minister? I mean, I take a look at the way that he's running the PPC, and I ask myself, I think he'd be very similar to, I think he would do a lot of similar things that Trudeau would do, except on a different angle. So for instance, Trudeau, basically says his MPs or his caucus isn't allowed to speak on issues for instance, abortion, right? What if Maxime Bernier did something like that as well? I mean, he already does it within his party. I ask myself, basically before you can govern, you have to, before you get elected to govern, you have to show you can govern. And Maxime Bernier, he really hasn't done that, not within the PPC by any standards.
Well, I think we talked before, and I the one comment I thought was kind of funny that you made, just because it was kind of, I don't know, it just sort of seemed like one of these almost movie-like lines about someone. But you said that you had heard for so long that Maxime Bernier was like the laziest MP in the Conservative Party, and you didn't really believe it. And then you joined the PPC, and then you saw it was true. He's actually that lazy.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I haven't talked to Maxime Bernier for more than 5 minutes, but I just feel like, the output that he puts up politically, it's just like he's not trying his best, not for anything. I mean, you got to think about their response to kicking me out. They're saying that I violated a party pledge that I signed. Maxime Bernier is a lawyer. He should know that you're not allowed to lie again about people. I never signed a party pledge. I never violated a party pledge that I signed. And like you said, Wyatt, it was a joke. Or Wyatt, it was a joke. It was a joke of a thing. It was basically as contractually binding as an "I'm not a robot" checkmark that you.
Well, there's nothing you're signing, and again, they're saying that the pledge just because you embarrassed the party, or it was that they wouldn't even point to the specific thing you did or the specific way you violated the pledge. But you had people out there like Mark Friesen just sort of like laying back, he violated the pledge. I can't believe him. Well, it's just he knew what he was doing. Blah blah blah. And it's like, you know what, Mark, shut up. All you do is just give Maxime Bernier back rubs all day and think you're being principled. And the thing is, I'm being as harsh as I possibly can right now. Mark Friesen is what is wrong with the PPC. Nobody cares about talking about the UN all day. This is the PPC does not speak to people's kitchen table like issues. At the end of the day, people care about inflation. I hate the UN. I hate the WEF. At some point, we all have to stop grandstanding and saying, well, I'm talking about the real issues that matter because I talk about the WEF or the UN more than you. And it's that's what the PPC has become with a lot of the influencers. Just people who just talk about how, don't you know about this issue that no one else is talking about? No one's talking about it because people don't buy groceries based on that issue.
And it's sort of like the death of the acceptance of nuance, okay? Listen, I don't like a lot of political posturing, and I've made the public examples. I made it on radio, I made it in National Telegraph articles, I made it in videos that this pussyfooting around that the O'Toole Scheer thing did and being afraid of conservative values is bad, and you need to stand on your values, and that's good. But at the same sense, I do understand that in some places, Maxime or Pierre can't go so extreme one way or the other that they turn off everyone else. There is an acceptance that you have to have, that some people have to be pragmatic in the sense of how they can win. I think there's too much skewed towards that philosophy right now, where the Conservative Party gets up in their own head and they're like, well, we can't, like, there was the Patrick Brown days. They literally told us we can't have principles because the CBC will say bad things about us. And we were like, okay, screw this. Like, that's too much. But this sort of like crazy purity test where it's like, if you're not tweeting at least 10 times a week about Bill Gates at the WEF, then you're not a real conservative. It's like, no, like, these aren't issues that anyone cares about. Like, you don't win anyone over with these issues. And like, the people you do, and if you're like, no, I want to hear about this, for every one of you have to understand there's like 10 normies that you're going to scare away. So like, you only have one vote. And like, if your issues are like, listen, my issues are, we don't nuke the UN enough. Like, I would nuke the UN. Like, if someone said, like, we're just thermonuclear strike, I want to start a nuclear war against the United Nations, I'd be like, I know this doesn't make sense rationally. It's a bad idea, but you got my vote. But for everyone like me, there's going to be 25 people go, what the hell are you talking about?
Here's the thing, too, is that you're right about the peer testing. I was in a Twitter space actually right after Anthony had gotten kicked out, like basically the morning afterwards. And I was in just this Twitter space. It was PPC people kind of trying to rationalize why Anthony was being kicked out. And I had people actively say that, well, it doesn't matter that Pierre Poilievre says that he's going to ban his cabinet ministers from going to WEF events, and he doesn't want anything to do with the WEF, and he hates their values, because that's just a dodge, because the real threat is the UN, and the WEF's just the marketing arm. So he's secretly saying he's still on board with the agenda. I'm like, what would actually satisfy you guys? I guarantee you, if Pierre Poilievre adopted Maxime Bernier's positions tomorrow, or Mark Friesen's positions, you guys would find out how he's secretly actually serving Klaus Schwab. It's ridiculous. It's
right
1
now.
year apart, and this is what actual reactionary politics looks like. When I say reactionary, I'm not just saying, oh, they're extremists or something like that. That's nonsense.
You see this right now in the States with the Donald Trump versus like Ron DeSantis type stuff, where there's just people absolutely nuts and like, DeSantis is disloyal right now. He's crazy. He's not real. It's like, Ron DeSantis is the only governor in the Western world who did exactly what you wanted during COVID. He's the only one, when actually had the reins of power, resisted abusing that power and locking everyone down. He's the only one that passes your COVID purity test, right, on every single issue, like vaccines, lockdowns, masks, whatever. And like, people like, no, he's thinking of running against Trump. So therefore, like, I'm like, all these political laws I pretend to stand on, I'm throwing them out the window, because it's just like, I'm loyal to the brand of the party or the man. And like, that's what I see a lot of the criticism against you is, it's like, you're against the purple team. And it's like,
in that same Twitter space, and this is what, going back to what you were saying, Daniel, about like turning people off of things. There's too many people in a lot of parties that just don't get off the ground, who have never actually put in the work on the ground. They like the social media hype, but they've never actually talked to average people and what they think about politics. A lot of people are really awkward. They don't really like talking about it. I think that's the problem in Canada, is that there's almost so little money in politics. It almost becomes something that nobody cares to talk about, because it's almost like, this is kind of the problem with restricting donations, is that there's no big money in politics, which means that politics becomes a small issue. So people think it's kind of weird to have like strong political opinions. I've gone door knocking in that Twitter space. People said that I don't door knock because I've never had my vote changed at the door. I'm like, then you're a fool. You've never actually spoken to the average people and figured out why they vote and the things that motivate them. It usually tends to not be the things that motivate you, because if you're perpetually online, and I'm a little bit perpetually online, you tend to get skewed views about how important an issue is to a normal person. Most people, again, it's kind of just kitchen table issues, a little bit of social issues, and foreign policy is like non-existent. Nobody cares about foreign policy. This is why Tulsi Gabbard gets clobbered in the Democratic primaries for president, because no one cares about her opinions about the Iraq war. It doesn't matter.
All of this, Tulsi Gabbard. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No worries. It's my talking. I drone on so much that everyone just starts getting.
Hold on. I think I found it here. No, you're right. Right now in the United States, I'm seeing the divide between like DeSantis and Donald Trump or whatever, the two schools of thoughts. But what I like about it is that, okay, people are actually engaging in dialogue, though. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I got good things to say about DeSantis. I got good things to say about Trump. I got bad things to say about both. And I kind of don't have my mind made up, which is why I appreciate that dialogue is happening. In the PPC, in the conservative sector, there is no dialogue happening. It's either you love Pierre to the end of time and you love the Conservative Party and everything that they do. If you like the PPC, Maxime Bernier, you're obviously a nut and you're trying to help the Liberals win. And the same thing's happening on the PPC side. You know, if you're not on Team Purple, like you said, if you're not on Team Purple, it's obvious that you're a CPC shell, that you were working against Maxime Bernier. And I think that stems a lot because, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of people who appreciate the PPC, but have never actually volunteered for them. The people that actually do, though, like they're kind of feeling silenced right now. And yeah, that dialogue isn't being able to take place. And they're essentially locking themselves within a cult of personality within the PPC or the CPC.
Yeah,
and again, it's not because big part
this next election. You're going to have some criticism of the PPC, CPC. So some PPC hardcores are going to forget who you are, and then or whatever, think you're great. But then you're also going to be a PPC shill for the Liberals. You're going to be accused of that. You're going to also be a CPC shill, a Liberal shill. So yeah, Wyatt and I got this. I've got this every election that I've been publicly covering. Is like I've been a shill of the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the PPC, and all three, and neither, and like, you know, hired by whatever by the lunatics. But again, but those are just crazy people. And I think most people are actually, you know, quite nuanced and reasonable. So I want to ask you this, because there's a whole other element of this that I think we've touched on, but I think we should really kind of dig into right now when we have time. We've got 15 minutes or so. What was it like getting calls and interacting with the party like after this article? So it's one thing to write the article. Yeah. It's another thing to get kicked out of the party. It's a whole other thing to have the party call you after you publicly express an opinion. And what was that like for you?
So, great question. Adrian Zikowski, or whatever his name is, he's the national coordinator for the PPC, called me at around 8:30 my time, and basically on a phone call, immediately talked about how my article was false information, talked about how I don't know what's going on. I have no idea the complexity of everything that's going on. Talked about my unprofessionalism, talked about how I violated the party pledge that I signed. And as a result of all of this, I was dismissed from the party. He was like visibly angry. If I recorded the call, I'm sure you guys would get that on his tone. I asked him if I was the first person kicked out of the party entirely. He said yes. And I was like, wow, that is surprising. A lot of people think that the PPC is the only party that's never been infiltrated, but I tend to disagree on that. And I was surprised that I was the first person to get kicked out and not some of the infiltrators. He was very rude in the sense that he kind of talked about how what I wrote in my article was confidential as well, but he can never pinpoint exactly what was false information and what was confidential. And I tried to get it out of him. He just said, we're not going to go into it any further. It's talking about it's all legal. And we said what we had to say. This discussion is final. Do you understand? I kept pushing Adrian for an email because he was speaking very quickly on the phone. I wanted to make sure I got it all down packed. He sent me an email, and Adrian's communication is very adamant that this is the final communication. The PPC does not want to discuss anything with me anymore. I've essentially been blacklisted and erased from the party.
They are technically right that you don't know what's going on because they have sequestered all of the information into the HQ and not let anyone know anything outside of their little circle.
That is essentially what the PPC wants. They want to be able to filter all conversations happening in the party through them. So this way they know exactly what's going on so they can continue to control the narrative. But what we know is, I'm not saying false news, HLA, Hastings Lennox Addington, they're writing publicly, backing up my article. So what I wrote was the truth. The PPC just didn't like it.
Wait, tomorrow is the last day that the HLA writing legally exists because Maxime Bernier and the PPC HQ demanded that they be dissolved, and now Elections Canada is carrying through that order tomorrow. Again, usually based on the constitution of a party, Elections Canada would have to wait for the vote of the party's board or something like that, some sort of transparent public vote, but they didn't because the PPC doesn't have any of that, so they can just unilaterally do it. But here's another thing, because you were talking about, I think you said something about a dictatorship, or maybe I'm just thinking, but I'm just imagining words you're saying. But I remember we were on Twitter the other day, and I bring up Twitter a lot in this stream, I'm sorry. But we were on Twitter the other day, and there was actually people defending you being kicked out as you were one of the infiltrators, and that they legitimately supported what they considered basically like a libertarian dictatorship or monarchy in order to respect their rights. They actually said it was the most the best form of government to have a libertarian dictator. It was like the most kind of mask off moment for a lot of people of how far they're willing to go in order to just kind of stay on brand.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage anyone to read the article. Like I posted it again in the chat. It's pretty fun. Like, again, this isn't a 45-page in-depth thesis report on the PPC that you need high-level information and knowledge to like follow along with. It's pretty standard length for an article. It's medium size, and like, it makes it as a clear thesis. It's good. It's clearly written. And then makes a couple examples and makes a point. Like nothing. You're just like, I don't even understand what they like. I don't even understand reading through what they could possibly claim like you didn't know the truth of, because all this is like publicly available information with a bit of your opinion colored in from personal experience as a PPC candidate. So like, I don't even understand where they could possibly draw this from. It like, again, I think it's just a willfully dishonest criticism and an attempt to silence. Yeah. But
no, that's exactly what it is. Like their goal, I'll tell you right now what the PPC's goal is in the aftermath. Their goal is to completely bury it, pretend that it never happened. If you notice, Maxime Bernier has been very active on social media, talking about the WEF, talking about the UN, all of these buzzword globalist issues that he continues to talk about, all those niche issues. They're going to pretend like this never happened. Martin Mass was the only person who spoke on behalf of the party to an article on the Western Standard. That's it. That's all they want. All of the good PPC members who are following up info@peoplespartycanada.ca and asking, hey, what happened to Anthony? And they're not getting answered to. They're going to continue doing that because they don't want opinions like mine out there. They want to make an example out of me. They only want to continue it.
And again, people can't hide behind the thing of like, oh, it was so small, they shouldn't have to answer anything to this. It's such an irrelevant situation. Like if it was so irrelevant, then ignore Anthony's criticisms. And again, the funny thing is that if Maxime Bernier wanted to, he could have just tweeted out, I don't know what Anthony's talking about. We empower the grassroots, and he'd probably have a mass of people saying, yes, Maxime, you're 100% right. We're all being empowered all day long. And the thing is, he could have done that, but you could tell how insecure they are. You could tell that they knew it was true based on how fast they acted. And also, by the way, and I just had someone actually message me on Twitter. I'm sorry, it's like the 10th time I brought up Twitter this stream. But
you can say Twitter and that Elon owns it.
Yeah, they just told me that that the PPC was calling for putting out emails trying to get people to volunteer in Mississauga Lakeshore. So they were putting out like effort into trying to get people to actually do work for them. And I just want to bring up the Mississauga Lakeshore results. I know it was a low turnout election for everyone, but the PPC literally, that's not it. The PPC literally fell below their percentage take from 2019. I think they got like 1.3% or whatever in 2019. They got 1.2% or 1.1%. in the 2022 by-election. And I think that's when you know the party is basically a fad party, when they have a really big moment in 2022 because there's a massive issue that is COVID that's sweeping the nation, and they were able to pull off 5.4% or whatever they had, or 5.2%. But as soon as that issue kind of goes away and most provinces are opened, and I know there's still issues around mandates and mask mandates and vaccines and everything, and I 100% want all those to be solved. I'm not for the idea that, well, we're 90% of the way back to normal. I'm like, no, I want it to be fully normal again. But it becomes a less serious issue for a lot of voters. So we're down to the point where the PPC doesn't actually have anything to rest on because, again, this is just basic political strategy. This isn't to rag on the PPC. This is all new parties. That when you're a new party, you actually want a base, a bunch of policy ideas that people, when they think of the PPC, think of. And the thing is, a lot of the stuff's in their platform, but the problem is they buried it kind of in 2020, 2021, 2022, is that it should be the party of flat taxes. It's the party of deregulation. It's the party of this. And it's kind of that. But these days, again, they talk so much about kind of like globalism type issues that all of that becomes buried and it becomes a fringe party, even though they could be easily mainstream if they just tweak a few things. And that's the sad thing about your article, is if they actually acted on the things that you were talking about and they said, okay, let's let EDAs be more experimental with how they operate. Let's make sure that they serve the local area, because regional EDAs, the concept of those are ridiculous. It does not help at all. When you're trying to organize door knocking, a giant regional EDA that takes 8 hours to drive across is not realistic. But if you have all this stuff together and you're actually making sure that you're like empowering the EDAs, you'd probably see growth, because 338 or whatever ridings are all working together to try and, or at least working separately to try and increase their membership, you are going to see gains. Right now, all the EDAs essentially are supposed to stand flat-footed and wait for Party HQ to figure out what they're doing, which is an inefficient way of doing it. It's effectively why every communist country fails, because everything is not going to work as it should when you're always waiting for the Politburo to bring down its decision.
Yeah, and the other thing is like the PPC in like by-elections, like you need to really like invest like in groundwork that you don't need to win, but like you need to show you can get over 5%. Like this is where you need to really heavily invest, go around, tell people your values, like spend time in it so you can get 7% and go, look, the PPC is growing, and keep the national conversation alive. And like this is why we talk about you need to invest in like one riding. Do what Elizabeth May did. Find a bunch of hippies, find the right-wing equivalent of hippies. If it's Bose, fine, go to Bose. If it's not Bose, find some place where there's like enough where you find like, okay, this is the riding where there's enough of like anti-hippies, let's say, like very based hippies. And you just say PPC, you start the cult of the PPC, you focus on what, like you build that thing. And then you say like, okay, we're going to win one. We're going to get into office. Because then you show, hey, we can actually win a seat. Like once you have one, you're like, the PPC is now a viable alternative. Then you get more national coverage that boosts you up a few percent, and then you've built a base you can go and grow from there. Like it sucks that like this isn't Europe where like parties can come out of nowhere because of proportional representation, right? If this was Europe, this is a different thing, but this is Canada, right? And you have to play the game as it's set to a Canadian system. And the absolute refusal to play to win in this environment is another thing. And like, yeah, they're right. Like the PPC is good when they're talking about their policies and like conservative stuff and pushing the Conservative Party forward. And that draws people to them. Like that's what I liked about them at the beginning, when it's like, these are our policies. Let's do this. Here's what we think about taxes, whatever. And this brings people into the party. Like you should be saying, also in Canada, this isn't America. You need to make a case for yourself to win. Like you can't just say other guy bad. But instead what they're doing is they're going these fringe things that no one is voting, no one outside of Mark Friesen is voting on what you say about the UN. Mm-hmm. People want to know, like, how does your policy affect my family? That's what they want to know, right? So you go with that, and then you build out from there. But, like, again, they're just rambling about the United Nations on Twitter, and it's like, this is why they're not growing. Like,
it's not just the United Nations, it's niche issues altogether. When the PPC first started, the niche issue of the day was the supply cartel. We have to stop the
milk mafia.
Yeah, and we have to stop the globalists at the highest level, right? This most recent federal election came around. The big ticket issue was COVID vaccines and passports, right? Now, the key issue, or at least the latest key issue that I saw the PPC really going hard for, was the situation that happened in Halton Hills with the large-breasted implant teacher. Like, the reason why Bernier only goes after these niche issues, whether it be the UN, whether it be, a pervert in a classroom or anything like that, it's not because he wants to institute change in a political way, right? It's because he wants to drive donations, because that's essentially clickbait for him. When he sends out his mailer and people see a hot topic issue that Rebel's reporting on, like, for instance, Mrs. Lemieux's giant, like, don't get me wrong, those breasts are awful. Yeah. But that is not what a national party should be talking about. The
thing is that other parties have done it, and I've supported them sending out an email in general and addressing the issue of basically like, hey, perverts shouldn't be allowed in the classroom like this, but that's where it ends, and then you move on to something else. It's like in 2021, it would have been fantastic where they were like, these passports are awful, all these mandates are awful. Also, we need to be going to a 10% flat tax so small businesses and people can actually have money to survive this inflation. We need to be able to grow our economy at this time that it's contracted. And hit stuff where people who aren't super invested in these deep political issues will understand. And then election to election, it's always that. And that's why we need this 10% flat tax. No matter what the sort of big issue of the day is, you can always also draw it back to the 10% flat tax. You can always draw it back to the fact that this is why we need to stop spending on this. This is why we have to delete this program. This is why we need this program and stuff like that. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
What I think is what would I think, and Anthony, I'll let you know why do you guys agree with this, is like what we're saying is not don't get into these things. Like we want a political party to take a stance on certain culture war issues. Like let's say, like hormone blockers for children. But we don't want political parties to get into the weeds of the culture war. Like that's for us. Like they need to be like they need to say like not gaslight. Like yeah, you guys fighting this fight. You're right. We stand with you. And that's why taxes should be lower and like national issues, right? So,
political parties exist to enact political change. And, it would have been great, like for instance, the PPC, wanted to organize some sort of delegation to speak in front of Parliament or something along those lines. Or if an EDA went out to support the parents that are advocating against Mrs. Lemieux or whatever the heck his or her name is, instead of like organizing a national like donation strategy, newsletter strategy.
Go door to door in those local areas based on local issues and sign people up saying we're the only people fighting for this, so we want to keep you informed on this issue and push to end it. We are also from the PPC, and you can even be upfront about the fact that you're from the PPC. But because no one else is talking about this, we're organizing on the ground to mobilize parents or mobilize, sort of like workers in this area against this thing, or mobilizing small business owners. You can do tons of little things like that, and it would be fantastic. But yeah, when you're only talking about the things that trend on Twitter, you're going to lose the vast majority of people who don't care about Twitter. And the thing is, people don't forget, and goes back to my Tulsi Gabbard example. Tulsi Gabbard is a fairly well-known person on Twitter, but the person who won the 2020 Democratic primary was Joe Biden, who couldn't trend on Twitter if he tried back then. There was so many people who were outspending Joe Biden, who had a bigger social media presence. Mike Bloomberg blew $1 billion in that race and won like Guam or something like that. It was pathetic. Or I think it was like Puerto Rico or something.
Don't you dare insult Guam.
Yeah, I guess that's the place that Tulsi Gabbard got her 2 delegates from, was Puerto Rico. But Tulsi Gabbard was shocked how bad she did because she would trend on Twitter every once in a while, and she'd do really well there. Her clips would do well on Twitter. And Joe Biden, who's not on Twitter, did well because most people are not on Twitter. Most people vote based on who their local representative is supporting, who their newspaper reported that Congressman Clyburn was supporting in South Carolina, which is why he swept that state. A lot of stuff like that. Like that's how Joe Biden won the 20. I don't like Joe Biden, but I'm just saying that the 2020 Democratic primaries is a great example of why internet virality is not a winning solution. It helps, but you don't win based on it.
Yeah, Joe Biden was a household name for like the past 4 years, right? Like he was on everybody's 6 o'clock news.
Yeah. So Maxime Bernier was a household name in Beauce, and then he decided not to run there.
Exactly.
To go back to that.
Yeah, exactly. Like on Maxime, like I honestly asked myself, Maxime, why don't you volunteer, coach a hockey team or something? Like I'm sure that's a way to get your name around in Beauce, as opposed to touring Alberta or touring Halifax. Now, mind you, I can't. There are great EDAs and there are great PPC members all across the country that do well for their community, that push the values of the PPC. They do so in a good way. I just can't get over I just can't help but feel that they get overshadowed by the Maxime Bernier show. So I feel bad for them. And, one point that I really want to make is that I want to remind everybody, you don't need Maxime Bernier to stand up against freedom. I've been doing it before I was a PPC candidate. I'm doing it now after that I'm a PPC candidate. All it takes is a brave individual. All it takes is just knowing your rights and knowing what you think, saying no and advocating for it.
Yeah, it's what I say. Like the PPC, like the candidates and the people who volunteer, like they have great NCOs. If we were going to make a military analogy, like I like the NCOs for the most part. They're pretty well motivated. Yeah, some are like crazy and going to yell things on Twitter, but like the majority of them, it's like a pretty good cast of characters. The problem is the generals and the colonels and is not supporting them. Like these guys are fighting a war without like coordinated air support or anything, and it's like, you just can't win.
We're going blind. Yeah, essentially.
Yeah, just go blind to your own thing. Like there's only so much you can do as a local candidate. Like to know how. Here's
a good example of like
support.
To round out our examples about them kind of stifling grassroots is that I think a good episode to kind of distill down kind of the way that the PPC kind of chafes at the idea of a party that actually is enabling its EDAs to do their own thing and enabling their cans to be independent, giving their members kind of rights in a certain sense, is the New Blue Party. The PPC was literally at one point in an informal alliance with Jim Carahalios' New Blue Party, which is a provincial Ontario party. And when the New Blue Party,
be right back, boys.
Yeah, no worries. The New Blue Party was growing quite quickly, and at one point, even though Martin Mass had said that the PPC and the New Blue are in an informal alliance, suddenly they pulled back on that and said, you know what, screw the New Blue Party, even though they're the most legitimate alternative party that has a constitution that has all these things. We're going to go off with Randy Hillier, because Randy Hillier's viral, and his Ontario First Party, which didn't even get enough signatures to get properly registered, and only kind of got registered like 4 months after the fact as the Populist Party of Ontario. Like
that he didn't even run with.
Yeah, that he didn't even run with. That shows you how flaky a lot of the top level influencers in the PPC are. Randy Hillier was a top level influencer, and he couldn't gather together like 2,000 signatures or whatever you needed, 3,000 signatures to be able to put his party together. He had all the resources. He had the resources of the PPC, and he couldn't get it together. Yet he kind of screws over Jim Carahalios by saying he's going to support the New Blue Party, or saying they're in an alliance with the New Blue Party, then switching to Randy Hillier, and then after Randy Hillier is basically exposed as some charlatan who's just going around starting fake opposition parties to make it seem like Doug Ford's a reasonable choice. That's when Maxime Bernier says, "Oh, I don't know who to vote for. Go vote for Populist Party. Go vote for New Blue Party. Go vote for Derek Sloan's stupid Ontario Party. Go vote for any of them," which was a great way of trying to not act like the New Blue Party was not the most legitimate party. And I could see Maxime not wanting to support New Blue, because if he supports New Blue, he's supporting a party that actually has a constitution, and people are going to be like, well, why don't we just copy and paste their constitution and make that the PPC constitution, which I think a lot of people would be completely fine with. And Maxime Bernier, by basically separating himself from the New Blue, never has to be asked that question.
Yeah.
This is actually my favorite topic to talk about in the world, because I've been kind of in the middle of all of this going down. So after the election, so first of all, one of my good friends throughout the election was Maggie Segunis. She was the PPC candidate for Cambridge, right? And I know firsthand how helpful Jim and Belinda were in getting her campaign kickstarted, right? I also know, like, just in talking with Jim, like how helpful they've been with the PPC. I actually met Jim and Belinda after the federal election. There was a play-on hockey tournament happening outside the ACC. I think we were protesting because the Toronto Maple Leafs weren't allowing people with the unvaccinated to buy tickets, right? So we organized a hockey tournament on Bremer. Jim Carahalios, Belinda are both there. Maxime Bernier's there. Randy Hillier was off, down the street hacking a butt. But everybody was there, and we were all conversing after the election. Like, Maxime and Jim had nothing but good things to say to one another at this public appearance. It was good to see both of them. They were smiling. They were taking pictures. I got a picture with both of them that day, right? And then I remember when Jim basically lambasted Randy Hillier in the Jacques. I call it the Jacques tweets, where he basically in 14 tweets lambasts Randy Hillier, calling him controlled opposition. I had the opportunity to ask Maxime Bernier to his face what he thought about this entire debacle. And unfortunately, I got a lot of the same responses that we've all gotten. Oh, Jim and Randy Hillier, they are both grown men, and I hope that they can sort out their differences. I don't feel bad impersonating Maxime Bernier's accent, because I have an atrocious French accent, so don't worry about it. Yeah, I was really unhappy with his non-answer, and his mentality was Jim and Randy just basically need to sit in a room, talk it out, and shake hands about it. I was calling him out because Randy Hillier and Maxime Bernier spent a lot of time together, and Jim Carahalios, a lawyer, a man in good standing with the PPC, was calling him a turncoat, was calling him controlled opposition. And this kind of ties back to the whole benevolent dictatorship thing that Daniel brought up earlier. There's a lot.
I'm going to point out, it's not that just he was calling him turn. It's like he was providing some evidence of some things that should be disqualifying.
I'll go find the article that we wrote for that.
Like, so it's not just like, yeah, it's type of things where Maxine instead, like, if what Jim was saying is true, then he needed to get rid of Randy, and because like he's not an ally of.
Effectively, what Randy Hillier does that is he will join movements. He will rise to the top of the movement. even though he encourages crazy and fringe actions, he will leave the movement to a better job, and then he will call everyone else like before nut bars. He literally did this in 2007 with the Ontario Landowners Association. He would literally block roads with tractors and whatnot and hold crazy protests that a lot of the people who were part of it weren't even exactly comfortable with. And then after he won a nomination for his area in Ontario, he basically just said, all those people are nuts, and that's why I left the Ontario Landowners Association. And they're like, you were the one who did it. But Randy Hillier's always been a PPC kind of establishment shill. I believe he actually endorsed Christine Elliott twice for the leadership of the party. Even though I don't like Doug Ford, he was probably one of the more conservative people in that last leadership election in 2018. Yet he still endorsed. Randy Hillier still endorsed Christine Elliott. He's not a very conservative person. I think he attacked people for having like socially conservative policies. He really is not a super big. He's a party guy at the end of the day who's willing to do crazy things to essentially disrupt opposition.
Well, you're absolutely right about his character there, but I was kind of putting it in. I agree completely with what you're saying. My mentality when I had this conversation with Maxime, I want to say it was October, November 2021 after the election. I wanted to give Randy and Jim the benefit of the doubt. I didn't know both men outside of a 5-minute conversation that I had with either of them. My mentality was Maxime has an opportunity to either A, identify a turncoat, or B, prove that Jim Karahalios is a fraud. And his non-answer basically gave me the answer that I needed to hear, that Jim didn't say anything that wasn't true. And as a result, people continue talking about how the PPC is the only party that hasn't been infiltrated by the globalists. But the reality is they've been infiltrated by controlled opposition. Take a look at Randy Hillier in Ontario. Take a look at Jim Torma in Ontario. I would argue it's already happened. So this whole mentality that Maxime needs to be at the top to only keep the good people in, it hasn't happened in reality. So what are we doing?
Yeah, and I'm also seeing some interesting sources where they might be getting finances from right now. It's going to take some more looking into, but I think Maxime was pretty easy to sway with money right now. So on this note, it's been over an hour, so thanks for joining us. People did have a question in the chat. BL was the comment. Where can I find Anthony since he's been removed from the Purples? So Anthony, tell the people how they can follow you. And you have to follow. That's after you like and subscribe and click all the buttons for us in the National Telegraph. But after,
I'll throw his Twitter link in the chat.
Okay, put his Twitter link.
If any of the 5 viewers here that came from my platform are following, please follow the National Telegraph. They've been doing a great job. I've been following Daniel Bordman even since before he got involved with the National Telegraph. He's been doing a great job since day one.
Thank you.
Mike Claypool has been pretty real throughout this entire 2 years that I've been involved in political life. So definitely got to give them a follow. Right here you can see my IG handle at Zammer Live. In a perfect world I'd be on every platform, but right now I think the best home on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Follow at Zammer Live, and that's it. I do cool things around town.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. I had a lot of fun. I like getting into the weeds. And Anthony, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for writing the article. And guys, we promise if there's any crazy updates, you will hear about them. So thanks so much for coming, and have a good night.